It was because I was working with History Channel at the time to help them promote that show Unidentified, where the TTSA guys all came up and had a whole show.
I don't think I saw that. No.
Yeah, it was Lou and Chris and everybody kind of going back and retracing to some of the steps. That's where the pilots all came out. But I was working with History Channel, plus, you know, I was with MUFON, and that's how I got that interview, is the people at A&E kind of told Chris, yeah, it's okay, talk to him. And you know, that was when that's what I was going in. I think I just messed up the headphones.
No, you're good. I'm looking at you. You look great. But when you look at organizations like something like MUFON, which is like a community, and then you look at things like History Channel, which is like media, obviously some of the very people who are being interviewed by these places, by someone like you, who's a representative of both, or other people on these shows like you just mentioned, obviously it includes the Lou Elizondos, the Chris Mellons, the government guys who they can say some things, they can't say some other things, they may be told to say some things on purpose for a specific reason. Like, that's obviously some sort of deflection for the government. But, like, how much do you feel the paranoia of being surrounded by people who are, for lack of a better way of putting it, plants to make sure that places like MUFON don't get to information that they don't want them having? Like, is that a constant, like, every conversation you get into, like, oh, maybe this guy works for him or something like that? Or are you more just kind of resigned to the fact that that exists and it just is what it is?
I'm resigned to the fact that it exists, which makes me constantly thinking about how to get one step ahead of it.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's like that. That's what I did with this movie. Is like every piece of information in this film, I got it fair and square.
Yes.
I got it out of these guys. I didn't have to say, well, you could tell me, but I won't tell anybody. I never made what I call the devil's deal. And the devil's deal in ufology is when you get called in by somebody in the know and they say, and you're a UFO investigator and you're all about getting the truth to the public, but all of a sudden you're in this room and they tell you something that, and you agree that you're going to keep it. You just sold your public integrity to the topic for personal information that you personally crave. And once you make that deal, and there's a lot of you out there that have done it, and you know who you are, and I know who you are. There's a lot of them out there that have done it. And now they're towing the new line. They're towing the new narration. They're telling the new story, which is basically we're whitewashing this last 50 years. And the information that we came up with over the last 50 years, we're using these new ways to introduce it to the public. So that's a lot of what the Bigelow Aerospace Project was all about, was how do we take this black stuff, black ops stuff, and top secret discoveries and technology and data, and how do we get it into the public in a way that we can just pretend all that stuff didn't happen. And so, oh yeah, let's study materials of Bigelow Aerospace. They probably never even had the materials. That's a whole debate in itself, because when this story came out...
What makes you say they never had it?
Well, because they want you to believe they never had it. Again, in Accidental Truth, we point out that that for a long time it was being reported and acknowledged that there were materials being studied at Bigelow Aerospace. There were news stories done about it. There were newspaper articles done about it. Then all of a sudden, after this big drop of the Freedom of Information Act about the materials, it's an about face. A whole group of people come together and say, oh, wait a minute. We said that there were facilities prepared to study materials at Bigelow Aerospace, but we never said he got them. And you see in the film, you see Ralph Blumenthal doing that, and you see George Knapp doing it, where George says, did you ever have... The New York Times reported that you prepared your facilities to study materials. Did you ever have them? And Bigelow's like, no, I never saw anything. And people have to wait to see what happens next. But the point is, when this stuff dropped from the FOIA requests, all of these new narrative backing people discredited it. The Pentagon discredited it. And then there was this big movement to get rid of any implications that Bigelow is involved in studying materials. And my personal opinion, and I can't prove it, but I think it makes a strong case, is that after the Alien 60 Minutes flap, Robert Bigelow didn't want anything to do with more classified, potentially sensitive information getting out with his name on it. And so there was an effort to walk the whole thing back about what happened at Bigelow. But we know that the files for OSOP and ATIP are there at the Bigelow Aerospace plant. The photos, the pictures, the documentation, it's all still there, or at least it was when I made the movie. So his involvement in this has, and his desire to at least drop significant hints to the public might have cost him a lot. You know, now he's doing life after death. He's not even doing the UFO thing. And this was after the drop of the material study information.
Or that could be a public front.
I don't. Yeah. Well, my personal opinion is that, he said some things that he shouldn't have said, and he paid a price for it.
It's also calculated, though.
But I can't prove that. But I do believe it.
He went on 60 Minutes. He planned out doing it. It wasn't like, TMZ caught him outside his house and he said something.
Right.
It was.
I think he planned it, but I'm not convinced that he had permission from the ground all the way up. I don't think that his handlers had said, hey, go on 60 Minutes and say there's aliens. And, again, another thing we point out in the film is that at the time he did that, this was months before the New York Times article broke and the admission about ATIP came out. Nobody knew who Bigelow was at the time. He went on 60 Minutes and said, yes, there's aliens. But a couple months later, I can't remember the exact time frame, but very shortly afterwards, when the ATIP story broke and Elizondo and all this, and it exploded into the mainstream, then all of a sudden, if you went back and cross-referenced what he said on 60 Minutes, and now you had this new information about who he actually was and what he was actually doing, it changed the entire landscape, and that escaped most people.
It also doesn't help that he looks like a Spider-Man villain. Something about like the close-cut stash and everything, like the perfectly coiffed hair. I don't know. Something about that. Again, like that's where I get my red lights go up and I go, okay, what's the real angle here? I mean, maybe. I could see what you just said could absolutely be true.
Well, look, okay, I'm starting to understand your thought process. Okay, so you have the evidence chain, everything is laid out, the things that Robert Bigelow said, the government contracts that are in writing, the reports that are in writing. But the one thing that tilts you over to thinking there might be something to it is he kind of looks like a villain from a Marvel movie.
He does. He looks like he runs a mass media empire and, fucks his secretary on the desk and yells at people on the phone and is read in at the CIA, or I don't know, something like that. My mind goes to those places. I'm just suspicious of people like that because I don't think. Thank you for watching the video, guys. Please hit that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.